Good morning, everyone. My name is Moya Habotoka. I'm a state law advisor in the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, and we welcome you to our Pride Month seminar hosted by the National Task Team on SOGI-esque, that is sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics.
Open link.
So, colleagues, I'm not sure if I'm audible. Please just confirm if you can hear me.
We can hear you, Topper.
Okay, excellent. Okay, so I think I will just start by handing over to...
I can hear you.
Can you hear me? Okay. I'll just start over by handing over to Advocate Lotz to provide us with the welcoming statement.
Thank you very much, Program Director. Honorable Deputy Minister, distinguished guests, and colleagues, good morning to you all. On behalf of the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development and the Secretariat of the National Task Team, I warmly welcome you to this Pride Month webinar under the theme commemorating 30 years of constitutional democracy, reflecting on judicial wins for LGBTI persons, regional developments, and navigating new frontiers. June is both International Pride Month and Youth Month in South Africa. This reminds us that the struggle for LGBTI equality is deeply connected to the aspirations and vulnerabilities of queer youth in our democracy. We mark 30 years of constitutional democracy. We recognize the significant gains made from explicit constitutional protection against discrimination on the grounds of sex, gender, and sexual orientation, to important court judgments and the equality legislation, while acknowledging that many LGBTI persons still face violence, hate speech, and exclusion in their daily lives. Today's webinar invites us to do three things: to reflect, to renew, and to recommit. We will reflect on key constitutional and judicial wins and the role of legislation and policy in advancing LGBTI rights. We will renew coordination in response to growing global anti-gender and anti-diversity movements that impact our communities. And we will recommit to closing the gap between rights on paper and lived realities through the work of the National Task Team, the National Intervention Strategy on SOGISC and related initiatives, including the implementation of hate crimes or of the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act. Our program brings together voices from government, Chapter 9 institutions, civil society, and faith-based organizations to discuss hate crimes and hate speech, strategic litigation, intersex rights, regional developments, and the organizing traditions of movements such as Soweto Pride. I encourage open, respectful, and solution-based engagements so that we leave with concrete steps to advance equality, dignity, and safety for LGBTI persons. I thank you for your commitment and partnership. Colleagues and distinguished guests, it is now my privilege and honor to invite our Honorable Deputy Minister of Justice and Constitutional Development, Mr. Andries, to deliver the keynote address. Thank you very much, and over to our Honorable Deputy Minister. Thank you very much.
Okay.
Deputy Minister now.
Hi, very, very good morning. Sorry, man, I think you guys had censored me and locked my camera and my microphone, but they are open now. Thank you very, very much. Program Director and co-chairperson of the National Task Team on SAGIESC Matters, Sibonelo Nanana Trawa, the esteemed panelists, members of civil society and faith-based organizations, colleagues. Hello. Am I audible? Okay.
Yes, Deputy Minister.
Very good morning and a very warm welcome. It's a great pleasure to be with you here at this Pride Month seminar under the theme commemorating 30 years of constitutional democracy, reflecting on judicial wins for LGBTIQIA+ persons, regional developments, and navigating new frontiers. We gather in Pride Month, in Youth Month, and in a year in which we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution in 1996. We're doing that under the theme One Constitution, One Nation, Reflect, Renew, Recommit. And therefore, I respectfully request that we all rise virtually, whether in body or in spirit, and recite the preamble to the Constitution of the Republic of South Africa. We, the people of South Africa.
We, the people of South Africa,
recognize the injustices of our past.
Recognize the injustice of our past.
Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land.
Honor those who suffered for justice and freedom in our land.
Respect those who have worked.
Respect those who have worked
to build and develop our country.
Build and develop our country.
And believe that South Africa belongs to all who live in it.
And believe South Africa belongs to those who live in it.
United in our diversity.
United in our diversity.
We therefore, through our freely elected representatives, adopt this Constitution as the supreme law of the Republic. So as to heal the divisions of the past. And establish a society based on democratic values. Social justice and fundamental human rights. Lay the foundations for a democratic and open society. In which government is based on the will of the people. And every citizen is equally protected by law. Improve the quality of life of all citizens. And free the potential of each person.
And
build a united and democratic South Africa.
And build a united democratic of South Africa.
Able to take its rightful place. As a sovereign state in the family of nations.
As a sovereign state in the family of nations.
May God protect our people.
May God protect our people.
Nkosi sikelele Afrika.
Nkosi sikelele Afrika.
Morena buluka sichaba sa Yesu.
Morena buluka sichaba sa Yesu.
Kotsi in South Africa.
Kotsi in South Africa.
God bless South Africa.
God bless South Africa.
Mudzimu fatuchedza Africa.
Mudzimu fatuchedza Africa.
Kosi katikisa Africa.
Kosi katikisa Africa.
Thank you very, very much. The preamble is a very powerful reminder, both of where we come from, who we are, and the values that inform what we seek to become as a nation. We gather not only to celebrate 3 decades of democracy, but to confront with courage and clarity the unfinished work of realizing equality, dignity, and freedom for all, regardless of sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, or sex characteristics. Pride Month is rooted in resistance, in communities who refuse to be silenced in the face of criminalization, stigma, and violence. That legacy resonates deeply in South Africa, where democracy itself was born from the struggle against oppression. June is also Youth Month, as we celebrate June 16th, 1976. The youth of 1976 challenged an unjust system. Today's LGBTQIA+ youth challenge us to make real the constitutional promise that everyone is equal before the law and has the right to equal protection and benefit of the law. Pride Month is globally celebrated every year in June. The month of June was chosen as Pride Month to commemorate the riots the riots held by members of the LGBTI community against a police raid that took place at the Stonewall Inn in New York City on the 28th of June, 1969. The Stonewall uprising began shortly after midnight when officers of the quote-unquote public moral squad raided the Stonewall Inn, a gay bar in New York. This led to violent confrontations between the police and gay rights activists. The Stonewall riots were a tipping point for the LGBTI community in the United States, and it paved the way for the fight for LGBTI rights globally. Pride Month events draw millions of participants from around the world each year. Typically, there are month-long celebrations and parades, as well as memorials held for members of the LGBTIQA+ community who have lost their lives to hate crimes and violence. Traditionally in South Africa, we also celebrate Pride in October, as the first South African Pride parade was held in Johannesburg on the 13th October of 1990. And I can say with pride that I was present at that Pride march, marching with the likes of the late Simon Nkoli and also now retired Justice Edwin Cameron. It's ironic and deeply concerning that whilst Pride Month celebrations are underway, LGBTQIA persons still continue to face challenges in accessing their basic rights, with many experiencing threats to their lives and dignity. Last year, ILGA World released new data and maps highlighting how laws affect LGBTI people globally. 64 UN member states criminalize consensual same-sex sexual acts. The death penalty is the legally prescribed penalty for consensual same-sex acts in 7 UN member states. In 5 more, there is no full legal certainty. At least 61 UN member states have laws, rules, and regulations that limit freedom of expression related to sexual and gender diversity issues. At least 61 UN member states present legal barriers to freedom of association when registering and operating organizations openly advocating the rights of LGBTI people. But there's been progress as well. 17 UN member states have nationwide bans on quote-unquote conversion therapies. In addition, 7 have indirect regulations and 6 have sub-national bans. I also just want to indicate there that during my first term, or first appointment as Deputy Minister of Justice from 2009 to the middle of 2013, I did have the opportunity to refer a case of conversion therapy of a school in the Free State to the South African Human Rights Commission. The South African Human Rights Commission investigated that matter, produced a substantive report finding that that conversion therapy program was indeed a violation of human rights. And I think for me, the point illustrated by that is that I think we need very proactively to have much closer working relations between civil society, between the executive, but also our Chapter 9 institutions to give full effect to the provisions and protections in our Constitution. Marriage equality is a reality in 37 UN member states. Proudly, South Africa is part of those 37. 9 UN member states ban non-vital medical interventions on intersex children, and 2 have enacted restrictions at a subnational level. 18 UN member states allow legal gender recognition based on self-determination. 30 years of constitutional democracy is a remarkable achievement, but the true measure of what we've achieved lies not only in our laws or our jurisprudence, but rather in whether LGBTI people, especially young people, can live free from fear, secure in their bodies, visible in their identities, and affirmed in their families, their schools, their workplaces, and communities. South Africa has become a global leader in protecting LGBTI plus rights. Our constitution was among the first to prohibit discrimination on the grounds of sex, gender, and sexual orientation. This is in section 9.3, which says that the state may not unfairly discriminate directly or indirectly against anyone on one or more grounds, including race, gender, sex, pregnancy, marital status, ethnic or social origin, color, sexual orientation, age, disability, religion, conscience, belief, culture, language, and birth. I just want to pause for a second also to reflect on history and personal experience. This anti-discrimination clause was first included in South Africa's interim constitution in 1993. And I think it bears testimony to the hard work of the organized LGBTIQA plus community and individuals such as the late Simon Nkoli, Bev Dietze, and Edwin Cameron, who intervened and lobbied very hard with the negotiators at the CODESA process, and in particular, the ANC negotiators for the inclusion of sexual orientation as a prohibited ground of discrimination. I remember in that time also being part of both the ANC structures as well as an organization known as GLOP, the Gay and Lesbian Organization of Pretoria, organizing seminars and discussions to which we invited Justice Cameron, as he now is, to give inputs on this issue and on the negotiations. And I think it was a major breakthrough that even at that early stage of our democratic transition, we could secure the inclusion of sexual orientation within the interim constitution and then ultimately in the final constitution of 1996. That clause further says that no person may unfairly discriminate, directly or indirectly, against anyone on one or more grounds listed, and that national legislation must be enacted to prevent or prohibit unfair discrimination. In other words, our Constitution operates both vertically between the state and citizens, but also horizontally between citizens themselves. The Promotion of Equality and Prevention of Unfair Discrimination Act was enacted in line with Section 9(4) of the Constitution. Parliament has also enacted other laws that give life to these rights. And since the transition to democracy in 1994, we've made significant progress in advancing LGBTI rights. These changes have been brought about not only in terms of the laws passed, but also by our courts through their judgments. We think, for example, of the Dutoit case, where the Constitutional Court held that certain provisions of two laws which prevented a lesbian couple in a permanent relationship from adopting children violated the equality provision on two grounds: sexual orientation and marital status, because the legislation confined the right to adopt children to married couples. In other instances, we've seen the recognition of same-sex partnerships in relation to benefits such as state pensions and other employment benefits and immigration rights for same-sex couples. In 1998, the so-called sodomy laws that made sexual intercourse between gay men illegal were struck down. In 2003, we passed the Alteration of Sex Discrimination and Sex Status Act. The Labour Relations Act makes it an offence to dismiss any employee on the grounds of their sexual orientation, while the Medical Schemes Act defines a dependent to include a same-sex partner. The Civil Union Act of 2006, which is celebrating its 20th anniversary this year, provides for the solemnization of civil unions by way of either a marriage or a civil partnership. One day I would appreciate also engaging in a webinar like this just on the Civil Union Act and the process that led to its adoption, because I think it also is a very inspiring story of how a progressive political organization, together with a progressive and organized civil society, was able to push the boundaries. When that legislation was first introduced in Parliament, it was creating a special form of civil unions. But through the process of engagement in Parliament, we came to the conclusion more and more that the only rational way to proceed is simply to recognize marriage as marriage. And I mean, it's with some degree of pride that I can say that as a deputy chief whip of the ANC during those years, we worked very hard to ensure that that bill was passed with one of the largest majorities that any piece of legislation has ever passed through our parliament. And I think it bears testimony to the ability of South Africans to think in a progressive and forward-looking way, to take an issue that has divided so many societies, that we were able as a society to unite around this groundbreaking piece of legislation. With all of the challenges that remain, I think the fact that South Africa was one of the first countries, definitely on our continent, but also in the world, to pass legislation like this is something that we need to build on to ensure that we secure and safeguard those gains and also consolidate and advance them. And I think because indeed these victories are the fruits of advocacy and litigation by LGBTQIA+ communities. Most recently, the Prevention and Combating of Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act creates specific offences for hate crimes and hate speech, ensuring prejudice-motivated offences are recognized, prosecuted, and punished. The Act is a milestone in protecting communities from targeted violence and incitement. It defines hate crimes as offenses motivated by prejudice based on characteristics such as sexual orientation, gender identity, sex characteristics, race, nationality, and religion. It criminalizes intentional hate speech that incites harm or advocates hatred. As you're aware, the Act's commencement depends on finalizing regulations to ensure uniform recording and reporting across the justice system. Draft regulations were published in late 2025, generated robust submissions from civil society and professional bodies, and we're pleased to announce that the regulations are at a very advanced stage of finalization, and we continue to sit on the relevant officials, the responsible officials in the department, to really make haste in finalizing those regulations. Once finalized by the department, the regulations will need to be submitted to Parliament, as the Act provides that any regulations must be submitted to Parliament for approval. If they're not approved by Parliament within 60 days, the Act provides that the regulations will be deemed to have been approved. But our journey is part of a broader global movement. The Sustainable Development Goals, particularly Goal 5 on gender equality and the commitment to leave no one behind, demand that we confront violence and discrimination where it intersects with Sogiesk diversity. Regionally, the African Commission on Human and People's Rights Resolution 552 of 2023 was historic. It explicitly recognized the rights of intersex persons and called for an end to non-consensual surgeries, infanticide, discrimination, and stigma. South Africa welcomed this resolution, and we must ensure that our domestic policies reflect the spirit. Many of you may have read in the media about a recent African Regional Interparliamentary Conference on Family Values and Sovereignty, which took place in Ghana recently and brought together parliamentarians from over 20 African countries. At the center of the conference was the draft African Charter on Family Sovereignty and Values, a proposed framework that seeks to redefine the family in a way that excludes same-sex relationships. South Africa did not support the Charter. The Member of Parliament who led the South African delegation is reported as saying that the proposed Charter conflicted with South Africa's Constitution and Bill of Rights. We continue our efforts in the region and on the continent to promote and protect the human rights of persons of diverse Sogiesk. Through our national task team and civil society partners, South Africa has contributed to regional dialogues on hate crimes and discrimination, building coalitions to resist the growing global anti-gender and anti-diversity movement. Our leadership must be more than symbolic. It must be translated into tangible change in people's lives. I just want to pause on that point for a second to say that indeed we cannot divorce ourselves from what is happening in the world at the moment. And it does paint a very, very concerning picture. The overall assault on progressive values, on democratic values, basic values of the rule of law, of human rights, of human solidarity, are unfortunately on the ascendancy. And I think that demands all of us to stand together in the broadest possible united front to defend, to consolidate, and to advance the constitutional values that South Africa holds so dear. Because we do face a global anti-gender and anti-diversity movement that is well organized and well resourced. Our response must be equally organized, rooted in coalitions that unite state institutions, civil society, faith leaders, academics, trade unions, and most importantly, LGBTI plus communities themselves. Progressive laws mean little if they remain distant from lived realities. This is why we value the work being done by the National Task Team and provincial task teams and the Rapid Response Team in protecting persons of diverse SOGIESC against hate crimes and violence. The National Intervention Strategy on SOGIESC 2023-27 have specific focus areas to achieve this, including the prevention of violence, community education, sensitization of service providers, and improved access to justice. 3 priorities stand out: strengthening first response and case handling, ensuring that survivors of violence are treated with respect and sensitivity, and that hate motivation is properly identified and recorded to enable law enforcement and prosecution. Secondly, deepening community-level prevention, expanding education initiatives in townships and rural areas to challenge homophobia, biphobia, transphobia, and intersex phobia, and thirdly, integrating SOGIESC into broader gender-based violence and femicide and social cohesion agendas, embedding LGBTI+ rights within national strategies to reduce inequality and promote social cohesion. And so, as we celebrate the 30th anniversary of the adoption of our Constitution in the spirit of Pride Month, and with the activism and vigor of Youth Month, let us remember that these milestones are not just markers of history, but living promises. The Constitution gave us a vision of a society rooted in dignity, equality, and freedom. Pride Month reminds us that those values must extend to every person of diverse SOGIESC without exception. Our task now is to carry forward that vision, to challenge prejudice wherever it hides, to build communities where inclusion is unconditional, and to ensure that love, identity, and self-expression are never grounds for exclusion. In honoring the Constitution in Pride Month and in Youth Month, we affirm that justice is not complete until it is shared by all. Let us leave here committed to shaping a world where equality is not only written in the law, but lived in every heart and every life. I thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Deputy Minister. I would just like us, you'll notice on the program, I have asked that we take a group photo. So I'm just going to amend my view, and then I'll just give everybody permissions to be able to switch on their cameras. And then I'll just like all of us to be part of the taking of the picture. Thank you. I have given everybody permissions. Okay, smiles. Thank you very much, colleagues. Thank you. I'll take this into my report. Three, two, and one. Thank you, colleagues. So we are now going into the second portion of our program. You can switch off your cameras if you so feel. I think everybody should, for purpose of data. Yes. I'll just remove that, disable camera. Okay, so I am now moving on to the second part of our panel, or to the second part of our program rather, which will be chaired by Sibonelo Ngananatrawa. Sibonelo Ngananatrawa is the Human Rights Coordinator at Out LGBT Wellbeing, and he serves as the Civil Society co-chair of the National Task Team on SOGI-esque, that is sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, and sex characteristics matters. In his leadership roles, Sibonelo helps coordinate civil society engagements on hate crimes, equality, accountability, and broader human rights protections for LGBTI persons in South Africa. Sponelo's work is rooted in strengthening responses to violence and discrimination while promoting dignity, safety, and substantive equality for marginalized communities. Sibonelo often unwillingly chairs the rapid response team meetings that are hosted on a monthly basis here at the head office of the Department of Justice. He has been in the sector for years, and when I started here in the department last year, he was one of the people who essentially held my hand through many things and continues to do so. So I will now hand over to into Sponelo's capable hands to proceed with the panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Moya Harbo, and thank you so much, Co-Chair, Deputy Minister Nell. I would like to greet everybody in the room, all protocol observed, and to Moya Harbo, yeah, you making me blush, but yeah, I guess, and also thank you for those kind words. Moya Harbo, you will assist me also in introducing my panel, but before we introduce my panel, I would just like to say a few words. I am quite honored to be a South African, especially today, even though Bafana lost yesterday, but I am still quite honored to be a South African. I guess, I think Minister Deputy Letsike, Steve, once said, people my age and her age fall in a category that we are not born frees, but also we were born in the apartheid state. So we have experienced both sides of the world, or of the system that South Africa has. And in that, a lot has happened in 30 years. I have seen change. I've seen quite a lot of things change. I've seen laws change. I've also seen mindsets or people change. But before I start, I would like to start with a quote by the fallen struggle hero, who was once also an ANC struggle hero, an apartheid, she fought apartheid, but also the injustices that were happening at the time in South Africa. And this particular person is Sally Gross, the founder of Intersex South Africa, or the late Sally Gross, the founder of Intersex South Africa. She says, my struggle, and it's quite simple, is to be seen as human, not as a walking specimen or not as a walking pathological specimen. And I think those words for me sit in my heart and also govern how I want to be seen as a queer person. I don't want to be seen as the other. I just want to be seen as a South African. And as you have said, Deputy Minister, reach my full potential as a South African citizen. But also before we start, I would like to share a personal story of a young Sibonelo, growing up in KwaZulu-Natal, schooling in a school which was previously an Indian school only. One day, Sibonelo picks up a newspaper, and in this newspaper, there's an article about the Civil Unions Act being introduced, or the Constitutional Court finding that it needs to be introduced within Parliament within a certain time. And in that article, an organization popped up, which is an organization which I now am in, which is Out LGBT Wellbeing. And in that article, Sibonelo found themselves. I was shocked that back in 2005 that being queer or being who I am was not seen to be normal. But in that newspaper, I found myself. I saw that maybe one day Sibonelo will be married. And maybe one day the person that I want to marry, at that time being a guy, I will be allowed to marry. And Sibonelo has realized, or later realized, that that dream. And the funny thing is that I now sit in that very office at OUT LGBT Wellbeing, which was responsible for the Civil Unions Bill together with other civil society organizations. So for me, when I was reflecting on doing this panel or facilitating this panel, I became quite emotional in realizing that a lot has changed and a lot has been gained, meaning that as civil society, there's a lot that we need to still fight for, but we need to protect the gains that we have, especially in the time where we have the anti-rights movement working against us, a well-oiled machine, well-coordinated, and working against us in making sure that our rights are stripped away from us, and the little gains that we have had will needs to be taken away from us. So, Moyo, I will hand over to you to introduce my panel before I get on with the panel discussion.
Okay, I will follow the sequence and order that you see inside on the program that was attached to the invitation. So I'll start with Mr. Nkhumbuleni Munyai. Nkhumbuleni Munyai is the Assistant Director for the LGBTQ program at the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development. Ndate Munyai leads the coordination of the National Rapid Response Team for Hate Crimes based on sexual orientation, gender identity, gender expression, and sex characteristics. Munyai engages the criminal courts, the NPA, SAPS, and civil society organizations to ensure the effective monitoring of hate crimes cases from the opening of cases through to sentencing. And he has 15 years of experience working in this particular area. So I felt that there was nobody who would be better placed to speak about these issues than Ndate Munyai, who's so vehemently passionate about this, as Sibonelo would know. I'll hand back to you, Sibonelo.
Thank you so much, Moyhabo. Mr. Munyai, and also to the other panelists, I would like us to have these two questions in our head while we answer or engage in discussion. The first question is from your perspective or your representative or your position, Mr. Munyai, and the other panelists. And you don't need to answer this question now, Mr. Munyai, but I would like it when you're answering the other questions that it sits in the back of your head. Is that how would you describe the current landscape of hate crimes and hate speech targeting LGBTI persons within South Africa and also within the region? And my second question of thought is, where do you see the biggest gaps between the constitutional protections and the lived realities of queer and trans peoples, especially within townships and rural areas? So to my panelists, please have those two questions at the back of your head while you're answering so that we cover those two questions, because I feel that they are quite important. But also to the people or my guests or the guest within the space, I would like us to take the opportunity to also answer a question on the chat box. And the question is quite simple. What does Pride Month mean to you? And I'm speaking to you only and you only. And we can drop that answer on the chat box. So Mr. Munyai, what practices or what practical challenges are faced by survivors or people who have experienced hate crime or hate speech when reporting hate crimes within the criminal justice system? And how can we coordinate between civil society and the state to strengthen our response?
Good morning, co-chairs, Deputy Minister, Honorable Deputy Minister Andries, and also Sibonelo Ngananatrawa, and all stakeholders present on the platform. My name is, as I was introduced by the program director, my name is Mr. Nkhumbuleni Munyai, an assistant director on SOGI SC program, National Coordinator of the National Rapid Response Team monitoring all hate crime cases committed against any LGBTI persons here in South Africa, in all 9 provinces. Coming to the question that you just asked, Sibonelo, the practical challenges for survivors in terms of what they face when reporting the hate crime cases within the criminal justice system, and how are we getting involved to make sure that the survivors get the services they deserved without fear of discriminations. With experience in terms of working in this program for over the 15 years, the complaint specifically that we received is secondary victimizations. Not only when the survivors are accessing services from the police to open a case. We're talking about, be it at the healthcare centers or any services that is provided by the government. In most government departments, specifically those provide services to the public, like your health department, at the clinics, at the hospitals. It can be a DCS if the survivors are incarcerated, they are at jail by the DCS officials. It can be at SAPS level when they want to access justice, when they want to open the case. Furthermore, another challenge that is very mostly important is when now the case is opened by the survivor, the follow-up by the investigating officer in terms of providing the feedback to the investigating officer on the investigation of the case, on the status of the case. So there is a gap between that part. But how are we addressing that as the rapid response team? We have South African Police Services VISPOL unit that sit on our National Rapid Response Team. They are responsible for visible policing. They are responsible for when you walk to the police station, when you said you want services, those uniform police that you see there, they are the one who are responsible to make sure that they address such challenges. So as we receive complaint and when it comes, we will engage our VISPOL representative sitting on the rapid response team. That's why we encouraged mostly members or survivors or anyone who want to access services at the police station level to identify the official who is assisting them, so that when we made follow-up as the rapid response team, when the complaint brought to us, we will be able to know who to engage, who is going to be held accountable for secondary victimization or for not be able to provide adequate services because they see it fit probably to call other colleagues behind the counter to say, look, there's a gentleman who is here, as they will put it, who is coming to report a rape case. 2 couples working for domestic violence, then the questions start coming out why those 2 are in a relationship, those kind of questions that comes up. So based on the complaint basis, as per merit of the cases, then we will be able to involve SAPS to provide us with those details in terms of how we get now to make sure that these issues are addressed, that challenges facing by the survivors. And also psychosocial support. That's why we have the Department of Social Development that is serving on our national task team, depending on the nature of the crime, and also the shelters. That's why we have the National Prosecuting Authority and the Rapid Response Team to make sure that we have those referrals, so that at least we know if there's such challenges happens, then we will be able to understand what is supposed to happen. You can go back, Muya, to the second slide, please, from the presentation. And then I will be responding to your second question here, Sibonelo, or how effective the rapid response team and international cooperation been in practice, and what needs to change to ensure accountability and survivor-centered justice. I would say when the rapid response team initially was established, there were so many challenges. there was a backlog of cases dating back to 2006, 2005, because the initial establishment of the National Task Team was through petitions from organizations domestically and internationally about the cases that are stuck in the criminal justice system, especially hate crime cases. We remember the case of Udisi Melane, who was a Banyana Banana soccer player. That was one of the cases that was on the radar of the rapid response team by that time. But then our Honorable Deputy Minister Andries established the National Rapid Response Team in 2013 to make sure that those cases are fast-tracked in the criminal justice system. It can be either the cases that there is no arrest, or the cases that are at the court level, to make sure we monitor them in terms of their appearance at court. Why are they taking long to be finalized? If the case is under investigation, what are the challenges? What are the bottlenecks from SAP's perspective, from the investigating officer, so that at least we can address this. So as I've indicated, the purpose of this presentation is to take you through what process we undertake as the rapid response team in frustrating hate crime cases in the criminal justice system. Second slide. Within the rapid response team, we have, let me say, it comprised of key institution that was identified to sit at the National Rapid Response Team. Of course, we have us as Secretariat, Department of Justice. We have South African Police Services from FCS, General Detectives and VISPOL. FCS specifically monitors sexual offenses cases. They are responsible for your rape, your sexual assault, only on the South African Police Services. And then we have General Detectives. General Detectives, this is your case of your murder, your assault GBH, your harassment, the kidnapping. We have seen several cases through Grindr apps of kidnapping and robbery targeting LGBTI persons. This function specifically fall under General Detectives Unit. We have VISPOL that I've just indicated. They are responsible to visible police unit, those who are in uniform, in terms of what standard operating procedure they have to implement to make sure that when a LGBTI person is arrested, where should they be placed in a separate cell? There's a case that the rapid response team was involved in Limpopo, where the request was made that the victims is transgender and must be put in a separate cells, where that challenges was addressed, and then it was done by the South African Police Services, who are serving at the National Rapid Response Team. And then we have the NPA, National Prosecuting Authority. We have nominated civil society organization. These are 5 CSOs. And please note, those 5 CSOs, they were nominated by the National Task Team. So we know that there are those landmark civil society organizations that we know they have been monitoring the cases, making follow-ups, supporting the victims, accompanying the victim at court, accompanying the victim at the hospital. So those 5 CSOs, just to name them, we have Triangle Project from Western Cape. We have FEW, Forum for Empowerment of Women in Gauteng. We have OUT here in Gauteng. We have Access Chapter 2 here in Gauteng. We have Foundation for Human Rights here in Gauteng. So these are 5 nominated civil society organizations that are sitting on the rapid response team. However, we are trying, as when the matters comes to try to opt in the Department of Health, Correctional Services, Social Development on the rapid response team, because some issues then will need those other government departments. But because they are part of the national task teams, then it is easy for us to make contact with them if there are challenges that need to be addressed by those government departments. Next slide. So the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, they coordinate, as I indicated, the monthly rapid response team meeting. They incorporate inputs, progress made from SAPS into the list of pending cases in the criminal justice system. For an example, if the matter was at court today, to give an example, it is the duty of the National Rapid Response Team to contact the investigating officer to provide us with the new court date and reason for remand on that case. So that information can be fed on the template of pending cases that the Secretariat is monitoring. We also ensure the team respond timely after receiving the report of the new cases, because what happens is when we receive the new case, it can be either in the form of the media, it can be either in the form of social media, it can be either in the form from civil society organization in all provinces. The rapid response team will make sure immediately after they receive the cases, they act on it. They make sure that the case finds its way on the template of pending cases. We also provide assisted criteria of crimes committed on the basis of bias, ensure support rendered to the victim in provided a strict no prejudice basis in a manner that does not comprise future legal proceeding in relation to the incident. This, of course, we do it with your partner CSOs that are serving on the National Task Team and also the National Rapid Response Team. Next slide. South African Police Services. They will. Next slide, Muya, please. The National Prosecuting Officer will oversee the collection of storage of forensic evidence, securing the scene until the arrival of the concerned investigative body, ensure all the available evidence that might indicate the identity of the suspect is collected and safeguarded, and obtain initial statement from the victim. Go back to the slide of SAPS. Provide regular progress reports on pending cases in the criminal justice system. Identify central contact number at national level for purposes of recording, tracking of cases, and reported at local police station. So what initially happened was when the rapid response team was established, the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development have had a memorandum of understanding with South African Police Services with the commissioner. By the time that Secretariat, which is myself, Mr. Munyai, will only be the one who made contact with the police in all 9 provinces if there is a case that is reported at specific police station in that provinces. Meaning that as I'm sitting here, I communicate with the investigating officer in terms of the progress of the case that is under investigation, in terms of also the case that is at the court roll in terms of the progress on that matter, and then also just for updating purposes on our national template of rapid response team. You can move to the next slide for NPA, the responsibility of NPAs.
Mr. Mnyai, I'm giving you 1 more minute. I don't want to take time from the other people.
Okay, quick one. National prosecuting, they ensure successful prosecution, ensure systemic reduction, provide a victim-friendly employment room, provide court preparation to support the victim in a regional district. Next slide, Muya. Civil society organization, they provide a safe caring environment and respect confidential official of the victim. If agreed and requested by the victim, obtain informed consent and make referrals accompany the victim to assist accessing services. And then the civil society, it is highly recommended that the key organization involved in the process develop memorandum of understanding between them to clarify on how information sharing will take place. So for us to be able to have a case on the National Rapid Response Team, this is the 12 points information that we will request. Number 1, from SAPS, we will request the name, surname, age, nationality of the suspect if there's an arrest, date of an offense of the case, report date, first appearance date of the suspect at court, brief facts of the case as captured on the docket, status of the case, name, surname, age, and nationality of the victim, name, contact details of the investigating officer, contact details of the section commander of the IO, details of the control prosecutor if there's an arrest, and then also the details of the court case number of the case that appeared at court. So this is just an example of the case if you check how it is captured on the template. Next slide, Muya. All those 12 points are captured as it is appearing there on the presentation. You will see that on the first column, the province where the matter was reported, you will see that that is the name of the police station and the case number and the charge and the court case number and where the matter is sitting at magistrate court. So this, then you will be able to see the details of the investigating officer on top, detective commander, control prosecutor, and status of the case. Next slide, Muya. All finalized cases with conviction or withdrawn and closed cases as undetected are moved from template of pending cases that we are monitoring to another template that is specifically meant for withdrawal cases or closed cases as undetected. So we have an example of case that is finalized with conviction. You can see that this is Panobutle Meta. The case finalized sentence to life imprisonment for 15 years with 5 years adult minimum sentences. And then the next slide, we have an example of withdrawn cases. Then you can check on the status. The matter is withdrawn because the victim apparently indicated that this will be handled by the family. It's a family matter. And then another example is the case that is closed as undetected. You will see why the reason that the case was closed as undetected. And the last slide is how we capture the case, the new case on the template for monitoring on a monthly basis. Thank you, Sibonelo. And these are my details. There are my contact there. There's my email address, and then also Muhayabo Toka, and then the details of the email address. Thank you so much, Sibonelo.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mnyai, and thank you so much also for your dedication within the National Task Team, but also your hard work. I know I'm able to call you even at 11 o'clock at night if I want an update on a particular case. Thank you for that hard work that you continue to give to the Rapid Response Team, but also thank you to also all the members of the Rapid Response Team, being SAPS, NPA, especially NPA, not saying the others are not special, but a special shout out to NPA, Advocate Salome, better known as Advocate Malav on SAPC News. But the hard work of the RRT really shows, especially when you look at the cases and how cases are handled, especially when the RRT has been called in to intervene. I see the questions on the chat. I'm going to we respond to them after the other speakers have spoken. And also maybe Moihabo, could you maybe please on the chat insert the details for yourself and Mr. Mnyai for organizations and individuals in the room who might want to report a case, because what we also have seen in Mr. Mnyai as the Rapid Response Team, but also as civil society, is that most of the time we report cases on Facebook and we don't report cases to organizations that are dealing with hate crime cases. So my plea as the chair of the National Task Team, but also the one who most of the time chairs the RRT, is that when we report these cases on Facebook for awareness, is that we also find the relevant organizations or Mr. Mnyai or Ms. Mohabo details and report the cases. I think Mr. Mnyai has outlined how do we report the case. It's where the case happened, what happened, which police station it was reported at, and also the case number of the case. So moving on to our second speaker, which was going to be from Access Chapter 2. Moihabo, could you please do the honors for me in introducing Lulama from Access Chapter 2.
Lulama Shongwe. Lulama Shongwe is an attorney of the High Court, currently practicing at the Access Chapter 2 Law Clinic. Her experience spans the private sector in risk management, labor and employment rights, as well as the civil society sector, where she has worked specifically in women's rights and LGBTQI persons' human rights. She is passionate about using the law as a tool to achieve substantive equality for marginalized groups and employs an intersectional African feminist approach to the work that she does. She appears on the webinar program as a speaker on strategic litigation under Section 9, subsection 3, and is identified there as an attorney at Access Chapter 2. Lulama and I also studied at the same university. We did a similar master's degree as well. So I've known her since I was in first year. So you can imagine the excitement when I then came across her name and face on these platforms around LGBTI rights. And I hope we can continue with that relationship as we have had.
So, schoolmate, Lulama, thank you so much for joining us. And I'm going to maybe just give you your questions. So you just go with it because I'm worried about time and I'm looking at there's a few questions we will need to answer on the chat. So, Lulama, looking at the Constitution, especially Chapter 9 and Section 3 of the Constitution, what have been the advances of of equality or the advance of equality based on sex, gender, also in sexual orientation, and where as a country do we fall short?
Thank you. Good morning. Good morning to the Honorable Deputy Minister. Good morning, Sibonelo, our co-chair, distinguished guests, colleagues, fellow advocates. A special good morning to Moya Habo. You have given me a qualification that I do not yet have. We worked together on campus, but I have not yet obtained my LLM. Thank you for the opportunity to speak today. As mentioned previously by Mr. Munyai, we at Access Chapter 2 are civil society representatives on the National Task Team on SOGI SC. As an organization, I work in our law clinic, which is the first queer-friendly law clinic in South Africa. We work specifically with human rights violations against members of the LGBTQI community, as well as vulnerable women and girls. In answering, I also just want to apologize for my voice at the moment. I'm recovering from a cold, and I'd just like to request your indulgence just for my purposes to be able to switch off my camera and speak just a little bit more clearly in terms of the contribution. So tasked with I've been tasked with reflecting specifically on Section 9.3, which is the equality clause in the Constitution, and how strategic litigation has been used in South Africa over the past 3 decades to advance equality for people of diverse SOGI SC. And I think to start off with, just to echo something that the Honorable Deputy Minister had also mentioned, to say that Section 9.3 of our Constitution is one of the most powerful equality provisions in the world. It expressly prohibits unfair discrimination on a number of grounds, including sex, gender, and sexual orientation. And at the time of its adoption in 1996, this was a revolutionary commitment because it reflected a conscious decision by South Africa to reject exclusion and affirm equality, the equal worth and dignity of all people. So strategic litigation has been used as one of the most effective tools for advancing LGBTQI+ equality in South Africa. And this has been done through carefully selected cases brought by incredibly courageous individuals, supported by activists, legal practitioners, and civil society organizations. Our courts have been able to transform our constitutional principles into enforceable rights using strategic litigation. And so the Constitutional Court and other courts have repeatedly affirmed that sexual orientation and gender identity cannot be grounds for exclusion from citizenship, family life, employment, dignity, or equal protection under the law. And some examples of these cases and these decisions, I like to speak about some of the lesser known court cases or judgments that have been handed down. One of them being Satchwell versus President of the Republic of South Africa, and another, which for me was not only a landmark case in advancing LGBTQI equality and dignity for the obvious reasons, but I mean, Judge Satchwell was an actual sitting judge in the early 2000s who was openly a lesbian woman, and she had a life partner, and there was legislation which was passed that did not afford her life partner the same pension benefits as her heterosexual counterparts. And so as a sitting judge, she took this matter to court, to invalidate that particular legislation and get recognition in terms of financial benefits for life partners of individuals in same-sex relationships, particularly in the judiciary, recognized. Another one was Deloitte versus Minister of Welfare and Population Development, which specifically dealt with the rights of adoptive parents, and particularly adoptive parents in same-sex relationships, to be recognized as the parents of the adoptive child, because previously the position had been that only one adoptive parent was recognized as the lawful parent of the child. And a third one as well was KOS versus Minister of Home Affairs, which is slightly more recent. This was a 2017 judgment in the Western Cape High Court regarding sort of gender recognition for transgender persons who were in lifetime partnerships or civil unions, and the administrative burden on transgender persons to have to get divorced if they were already in a civil union or civil marriage with their partners in order for the legal gender recognition process with the Department of Home Affairs to go through. And I think, I think those are quite clear and stellar examples of judgments that did more than resolve disputes between individual parties. They reshaped the legal landscape of our country, and they established that LGBTQI plus persons are rights-bearing citizens who deserve dignity and equal protection. I think another important aspect of the way that strategic litigation has helped to move equality from the margins of the public debate to the center of constitutional discourse is by challenging discriminatory laws and transforming legal institutions and establishing precedents that continue to guide policymakers and public officials today. And I can't understate how significant these victories were, how significant they currently are, and how they remind us constantly that courts matter, right? They remind us that strategic litigation remains an essential mechanism for social change. But an honest evaluation requires us to ask not only whether litigation succeeded in changing the law, but whether it succeeded in changing lived realities. And I think this sort of ties into the two questions that Sibonelo had asked in the beginning of this session. You know, and this very juncture is where the picture becomes slightly more complex, because while legal equality has advanced considerably, substantive equality still remains unevenly experienced by members of the LGBTQ community and people of diverse SOGI SC. So for example, for many lesbian women, particularly Black lesbian women living in townships and rural communities, violence and discrimination remains a persistent threat. When I think about, you know, the situation that Black lesbian women are facing, particularly, I think about when I was quite young, probably the mid 2000s, you know, from 2005 to 2009, there was an increase in reporting of corrective rape. And I'm talking reporting just in terms of the media, because when we talk about reporting in terms of the actual cases, it's a completely different story. But I remember just very distinctly consuming a lot of media that spoke to the abject violence that lesbian women are facing on a daily basis, especially in townships and rural areas, with the scourge of corrective rape being the number one form of violence that is enacted against them. And I mean, today, still, for many transgender and gender diverse persons, legal recognition does not always translate into access to respectful healthcare, for example, or employment opportunities, education, or public services. The situation is even dire, you know, without putting people on a scale and having a struggle Olympics. But for intersex persons, the situation is even more dire because significant gaps remain in awareness, protection, and recognition. And so for many young LGBTI people, constitutional rights may feel distant when confronted with bullying, family rejection, homelessness, or social exclusion. And so a favorable judgment in this context is often the beginning of change rather than its completion. And so one of the lessons from this past 3 decades is that implementation matters as much as legal victory. Is this you telling me I'm out of time, Sibonelo?
Yes, in the most subtle way.
Sure. But yeah.
But before you conclude, Lulama, and you are quite correct when you're talking when it comes to intersex persons, and I also even feel that as a movement, as a civil society, I don't think we have done much in making sure we advance the rights of intersex people. I think that shows itself even in how Home Affairs records sex. It does not record, for example, intersex. It only has male and female. But Lulama, maybe in a minute, how does balancing litigation with the broader movement building and also community education, how can we do that? How can we advance that and balance it out?
Yeah.
Because we can't keep on suing people at the end of the day. Yeah. So we have to come to a point where we balance people's mindsets, we change people's mindsets. How do we do that?
So from my perspective, I think future litigation will increasingly focus on implementation failures, access to healthcare, protection from hate crimes, inclusive education, administrative barriers affecting transgender and gender diverse persons, and the recognition and protection of intersex persons. But most importantly, all of this will require a stronger intersectional approach. And so because the experiences of LGBT persons are shaped not only by their sexual orientation or their gender identity, but also by their race, class, disability, geography, age, and other factors, the constitutional commitment to equality is going to require us to recognize these overlapping forms of disadvantage and to ensure that strategic litigation addresses these realities for those who remain the most vulnerable by tapping into sort of multidisciplinary, but as well as intersectional approaches to upholding equality. That's where you see a collaboration, most importantly, like Mr. Munyai had mentioned earlier on, between, you know, the different sectors to be able to speak in one voice and then achieve one goal. Because I think right now, as much as we have already began the process of trying to collaborate more often, we still find ourselves working in silos and at some point, and sometimes clashing, you know, playing the blame game to a certain extent, and not enough calling each other in. So that is what I see more. And I think we, in the National Task Team, we have a great example of that, where we have the NPA, the SAPs, the civil society, the government in the DOJ sitting at the same table and working towards the same goal. Yeah.
Thank you so much, Lum. And I would really like to also emphasize that partnership. And you know how, especially within the RRT, when we deal with these cases, the room sometimes can get very tense. However, as civil society and government and Chapter 9 institutions, we do find each other in making sure we all hold each other accountable in that table and make sure that when we leave the room all in a good space, but also with a solution, because I think it is important. And I always see that being played out in the RRT is that the reason why we do this work is not because of us, it's not because of the organizations, it's not because of government, but the reason why we do this work is because of the people that we serve on the ground. And if we don't come to the table and find each other and also hold each other accountable, we are then failing in our mandate in making sure that the responses of the Constitution, but also the responses of government and civil society are felt and also enjoyed by the person in the ground. In the ground, I am meaning in rural areas, I'm meaning in CBDs, I'm meaning in metros, I'm meaning in the townships, I'm meaning experienced by everybody, black, white, colored, whatever color you want to be. So with those words, thank you so much, Lulama. I will call upon you to have your closing words. Ms. Moihabo, now I'm moving into faith-based, and I'm going to be calling upon Thuli. Would you be pleased do the honors for me to introduce Thuli from I Am?
Nokuthula Mjwara Thuli is the strategic advocacy coordinator at Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, that is I Am, in the Western Cape. She works at the intersections of gender, religion, and human rights. She facilitates community-based interventions to address religiously based homophobia. Thuli works with civil society partners on initiatives that support human rights advocacy, embodied leadership, diversity awareness, and addresses conversion practices throughout the continent. With a strong commitment to equality, Thuli uses queer theology to engage religious leaders and support the dignity of same-sex sexualities from a decolonial feminist perspective. Thuli is a 2022 Outright International United Nations Religion Fellow, a SACA accredited facilitator, and more recently, the civil society co-chair of the Western Cape Provincial Task Team on Hate Crimes. The Western Cape Provincial Task Team. She is currently also a student pursuing a master's degree in gender and transformation at the University of Cape Town.
Sis Thuli, I would like to welcome you. I know me and you were not in the same university as Moya and Lulama, but I have always looked up to you from the days when I used to work and volunteer at an organization called the Lesbian and Gay Center in Durban, when you will come into our spaces when we had your political discussions, but also we had your debates, which we had on Wednesday, and you will give such inspirational insight on queerness, but also identities such as bisexuality, but also as putting or flying the flag high on Black lesbians. So Thuli, I would like to welcome you into the space. And my first question to you, Thuli, would be looking at faith and how does faith, sorry, my thing went up, my questions went up. The anti-gender or the anti-rights movement, let me not call it the anti-gender movement because it's not only targeting gender. The anti-rights movement often relies on culture and religion, on pushing their narrative. How can the affirming of faith-based voices effectively counteract this narrative without deepening community polarizations? And I'm also, while you're answering this question, maybe please touch base on how is the anti-rights movement doing its work in making sure that xenophobic attacks are a lived reality in South Africa, but also affecting queer, especially Black queer people in the country who are seeking asylum and refugee. Over to
thank you. Thank you, Swanilo, for the introduction. And yeah, thank you for having me. So, comrades, colleagues, and friends, as we gather to celebrate Pride Month and to confront a growing global tide, which is namely the anti-rights movement. In South Africa, we're marking 32 years of constitutional democracy, and this calls on us to reflect, renew, and recommit to ensuring that equality, dignity, and freedom are lived realities for all. We all know that the anti-rights movement has begun organizing within our political, communal, even personal spaces, as we see the growing rise of the March in March, which calls into question who is funding them, and who is the holding invisible power in such an anti-Black, anti-inclusion acceptance wavefront that we're seeing. But also early this year, there was a petition circulating that stated that parents do not want comprehensive sexuality education in South Africa. This petition was initiated by the Kenyan Christian Professionals Forum, which is a Kenyan-based organization that is funded by and has ties to Family Watch International. This is one example of how the anti-rights initiatives are spilling across borders, and one cannot get comfortable in saying that it won't reach us. As Inclusive and Affirming Ministries, we've also engaged with faith leaders who have shared having been approached by anti-rights leaders with proposals of funding for community development initiatives in exchange to upholding their principles and amplifying their anti-rights rhetoric. The community dialogues on the Marriage Act saw the growth of independent bodies opposing LGBTQI inclusion and guised as family protection and upholding religious law. One thing about the anti-rights movement is that it thrives on fear, misinformation, and exclusion. Our task is to respond with courage, truth, and solidarity. Nolazi Tusini on ENCA yesterday she was commenting on the need for journalists to return to journalistic principles and ethics of fact-checking and doing research, as those who consume TikTok or podcasts draw news provided by media houses to help shape opinion. The anti-rights push a doctrine of what family looks like, which is often incongruent to how African families look like. Culturally, women in our families have held decision-making powers, and we see a high rate of women-led, elderly-led households that offer an alternative image of family. Culturally, we also recognize that family is not limited to biological kinship, with many of us having grown up in shared households where not only were you sharing households, you were sharing clothes and meals with people who were often not biologically related to us, but who came and became family members. It is through this history and lived experience that we need to reject these principles of family values that do not reflect our histories and who we are. Faith leaders possess immense cultural, moral, and institutional authority. While public statements of support for LGBTQI people can establish necessary baseline for visibility, words alone do not provide a roof, a shield, or systemic change. To actively protect vulnerable individuals from violence and exclusion, and this is including the Black queers who are seeking asylum at this particular moment, faith leaders need to move from being passive allies to active practitioners of safety. So here we are looking at things of, we need faith leaders to become, their voices can effectively counter anti-right narratives by centering shared moral values like love, dignity, and justice, while building bridges through dialogue rather than confrontation. This prevents deepening community polarization. That way, people are not choosing sides, but it becomes one of how do we then come back to the principles of love, dignity, justice, and hospitality. Faith leaders need to encourage inclusive interpretations of scriptures, prayers, haditha, and fatwas, because all prophets are known to be on the side of the most oppressed and marginalized, and no prophet ever preached hate or violence. We must reclaim faith traditions as affirming of diversity, but also build bridges and amplify that we stand for what we stand for as what we are, as opposed to what we're against. So sometimes we are very quick to say we're against this, but we also need to be vocal and amplify what is our narrative that we want to be dominant. So we need to amplify what we stand for. And we need to create a culture of inclusion and be open about it, linking oppression to issues such as poverty, land rights, and gender-based violence. I'll hand over to you, Sibonelo, for the next question.
Tuli, maybe we won't have time for the next question, but I want you to give you a surprise question. Yes, I'm always given surprise questions, so I get the opportunity to do the same to you. What does pride mean to you?
What does pride mean to me? So pride has always been for me about, being visible, marching, saying we are here, celebrating our rights, celebrating the celebrating the fact that within our country we have the ability to hold hands, we are able to get married, but also even watching TikToks where young men and young girls are asking each other out to matric dances. I went to a school where we were told for our matric dance, you cannot bring a same-sex partner. So even if you were lesbian, you still had to bring a male friend as the partner. So it's witnessing that. However, I'm also doing my research, looking at the theological praxis of Imam Muhsin. And what I've started to learn is that sometimes we have looked at the closet as a space of oppression. And sometimes as activists, we also need to unpack that the closet may not necessarily be a space of oppression for everyone, but it's a space that allows people to still uphold family kinship, access to support spaces that often, if they do come out, they risk losing.
I'm not sure, colleagues. Oh, sorry, you're cutting, Tuli.
Sorry,
I think it's.
Sorry. And the question, my network, I will just switch off my camera as I close quickly. But what I wanted to say is that I'm learning that to find ways in saying, how do we also equip those who choose to stay within the closet to have the conversation? So to open hearts and open minds without necessarily having to march or have the space of having to come out. And also, how do we as activists stop seeing the closet as a space of oppression, but also as an alternative space of liberation? That said, I thank you for this opportunity, and I really hope everybody has a great pride as we celebrate our constitution and our democracy. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Tuli, and also thank you for touching on the work of the Imam, and may their soul rest in peace, and also for the great work that the Imam's organization has done, being the Inner Circle, and the great work that continues to be done by I Am, and also organizations such as JIN. I'm going to move on to my favorite activists, because they have given me an honorary label, being the black lesbian, the national black lesbian, not taking away from Steve Letike, but I'm also a national black lesbian, given a title given by Forum for Empowerment of Women. And before I give over to you, Moihabo, to introduce Jade, I would like to read a quote by our comrade and a living comrade. And we are lucky in South Africa, we still have living legends, by Phumi Mthethwa, where she says, I am a black lesbian. I am a lesbian woman from a working class background who is raised in a township. I grew up holding all of these identities within me, and I still do, meaning we cannot separate our lesbianism, like myself, from the struggles that we come from. But I want for a change. I know most of the time when we speak about lesbians, we normally frame them in a place of victimization, but the next speaker is a powerhouse, a black lesbian who has gone beyond the odds, a black lesbian when they walk into the room notices them, a black lesbian when they talk, the room listens. And I think that's where I find also my inspiration, is that this movement, this sector, has been held for years by black women such as Nonhlanhla Mkhize, black women such as Tuli, black women such as Virginia Magwaza, black women such as Bev, Dr. Bev, black women such as Phumi Mthethwa, black women such as all the Black lesbian women who have been powerhouses, and those who might not be Black in color but Black in heart, such as Sharon Crox, Black women such as there's just so many of Black lesbian women who hold us in the sector and hold the sector, especially when the sector is struggling to go forward. So Moyahabo, I will give over to you to introduce Jade, the powerhouse, the director of the Forum of Empowerment of Women.
Jade Madingwane is an activist in the LGBTQ community in South Africa. She currently serves as the executive director of the Forum for the Empowerment of Women. She's a Black lesbian, bisexual, and queer feminist. FEW is a Black lesbian, bisexual, and queer feminist organization that seeks to advance and protect the rights of Black lesbian, bisexual, and queer women. Jade has led sexual orientation, gender identity, and expression trainings with key stakeholders within government as well as within the private sector, including South African Police Services, the Department of Social Development, Department of Health Workers, the South African Democratic Teachers Union, as well as the Department of Basic Education. Jade is also one of the organizers of the annual Soweto Pride and supports the Queer Book Fair as a platform for queer authors, writers, and readers. And she also facilitates intimate partner violence dialogues and broader community dialogues. Jade envisions a world where queer people are truly free and views her work as contributing to that reality for herself and other queer people in South Africa and the SADC region, as well as the continent.
Jade, welcome. My question to you, Jade, I'm just going to put them in one because I'm looking at the time. Why is it critical for LGBTQ women, especially Black women in townships and in rural areas, for us to highlight the intersectional experiences of hate crime response, and also how does Pride organizing help with this? But also my second question will be, what does meaningful inclusion looks like beyond representation, especially for Black queer women facing multiple forms of violence? And I know we are talking about violence, but please don't take that I am putting Black lesbian in a box of violence. I want you to speak from a space of power and a space of also a bit of privilege. So Jade, over to you.
Thank you so much, National Lesbian, and thank you for the bio, Moyahabo. Good morning, everyone. And you said good evening. Good morning, everyone. As stated, I am Jade Madingwane. And to answer your question, Nganana, I think that while South Africa has celebrated our constitution, and that constitution has also been celebrated globally, I really don't think that we kind of look at the protections of the Constitution, right? And when I say that, I say this because many LGBTQ people face and navigate multiple systems of oppression. And as much as we've got constitutional rights, but the lived realities are often uneven, right? So when you talk about the violence that Black lesbian women face in particular, this is always the narrative that we hear, right? And for many of us, our identities are not singular, right? We are queer, we are women, we are Black, we are somewhat working class, we are from rural areas, we are migrants, we are unemployed, and we are survivors of violence. And I think that these realities intersect in ways that shape our daily experiences, you know. I think this is why intersectionality cannot simply just be a theoretical framework. It must also be a practice and a practical tool for organizing. And if we are serious about advancing LGBTI rights, I think what we need to understand is that queer liberation is connected to struggles against patriarchy, racism, poverty, unemployment, xenophobia, ableism, and gender-based violence, ultimately. And so our movements become stronger when we recognize like all of these connections, because I think what we tend to do is work in silos. But I think that when we recognize all of these intersecting oppressions, I think that this is how we then can move. So at Few, I think we understand the work that has shaped us for over 2 decades, right? And I will speak on Soweto Pride because your question was tied to the legacy of Soweto Pride. So when people think of Pride, I think they often think of it as a celebration. But for many Black queer communities in South Africa, particularly in Soweto, Pride has always been about survival. And I say this because Soweto Pride emerged because mainstream Pride spaces were not adequately reflecting the realities of our queer existence as a Black people that live in townships, rural areas, peri-urban areas, you know. The pride emerged because our communities needed spaces for us to experience queer joy, and as well as pride being a political space we we would freely march in spaces where we are often told being queer is an African. Soweto Pride is not an event. It's not just a simple event. It's a political intervention, as I said. It's a political tool that we use as an advocacy tool that we use as an organization to raise awareness of our queer identities. Soweto Pride declares that the Black queer person belongs everywhere. It affirms that townships and communities are not sites for violence, right? That's why we speak about queer joy, right? So Soweto Pride runs in 2 days from Friday to Saturday. And then this started just last year when we turned 21. And the reason for having the political aspect of it on the Friday and setting our footprint as LGBTI people in a very historical place was because we also wanted to set our footprint as LGBTI people with the stalwarts that have walked that land, but have also fought in the struggle of apartheid. And so the reason we have the political aspect on the Friday is to allow for organizations, government institutions to participate in the march itself, because that is important for us as an organization. And then the second day really is about queer joy that I speak about, because oftentimes with our LGBTI communities, we hardly ever experience queer joy, because when you talk about queer joy, you can even ask Munyai. Most of the cases that have come from Few have been in a tavern, and those are the only those are the only social spaces, sorry, not safe. Those are the only social spaces that exist in townships, in rural areas. And there is no other space that exists for queer people, for queer joy, right? Um, so yeah, well, I blab. So I think, I mean, most importantly, Soweto Pride really does center Black LBQ, but also the entire LGBTI person. And the legacy of Soweto Pride really does remind us that we must constantly be connected to community realities. What we often do as organizations, I think that when we are now kind of global or regional organizations, we tend to forget about grassroots organizations. And this is why we then had a pride advocacy program, which Soweto Pride falls under the Pride Advocacy Program. The Pride Advocacy Program really is to educate communities, rural communities, on how to organize a community pride, because we believe that having as many prides as possible is very important for us, because we are being erased ultimately as an Africa. So we want to make sure that there are many prides as possible, particularly in townships and rural areas. And we've offered training to multiple communities that have had successful prides. And for us, it's always beautiful to see that communities are engaging, communities want to let their communities know that they're queer, they're Black, and they exist, you know. So yeah, this really is about creating community visibility and yeah, Pride also does not only serve the queer community, right? It serves anyone within the community, because when we march in Soweto, we're often asked questions by community members, and some of them actually do join the march, and that on its own, it's beautiful and is somewhat of a transformation. And this is why if you invest so much in building and kind of supporting community prides, because when you go, for example, we went to Neisner a couple of years ago, and they had their first community pride. We provided them training and they had their first community pride, and an old woman was just kind of applauding the organization for actually having the pride, because they then said that, oh, I have a child that is intersex, but I don't know what that means. Obviously, they mentioned it as my child has like two parts. They didn't know the meaning of intersex, and they were very happy to know that there are organizations like the I forgot their name. There are organizations that do kind of host prides and do work around LGBTI people. Yeah, so I really think that answers your question.
You do, Tate. You do. You are like doing amazing work, especially with grassroots organization, especially also in rural areas. And I wish you and your team the strength to continue doing what you are doing. And I think Soweto Pride is an example of a pride which really speaks to the Black lived realities, from the business people who you see at Pride, to the people that you see at Pride, to the type of what do they call atmosphere that Soweto Pride creates. You are doing an amazing work, and really, as a Black queer person, it's where I also find myself in the prides that you'll organize. I think you would know, when I come to your pride, I am not coming to work, I am coming to celebrate my queerness. So with those words, thank you so much, Jade. I am looking at the time, so I'm going to rush to the next speaker. Moihabo, do we have the next speaker? I just saw a chat. I'm not sure if they will be able to speak.
Yes, I think I can.
Oh, you can. Okay, before you come in, Tara, okay, no, let me let Mohabo introduce you before I flop it. Mohabo, please do introduce.
Okay, Turuna Naidu is a passionate human rights advocate. She's a multidisciplinary artist and author whose work intersects with the law, advocacy, and the arts to advance LGBTQ rights and social justice. Turuna currently serves as the Africa Project Officer at Outright International. She leads work across the sub-Saharan African region, addressing the rights of LGBTQ individuals and championing the elimination of conversion practices, with professional experience that includes serving as litigation coordinator at the Institute for Strategic Litigation in Africa, as a project officer for the SOGIESC unit at the Center for Human Rights, and an associate in communications and advocacy at the same Center for Human Rights at the University of Pretoria. Turuna brings both strategic experience and lived experience to this work. She has contributed to important policy development as a consultant, including the UP Trans Protocol and the Model Policy Framework for Trans and Gender Diverse Students in Higher Education Institutions. We will welcome Turuna, and I guess to show the level of biasness, I also went to school with Turuna. So me, Turuna, and Dulama were all in the same cohort when we were in school, and we are here now again.
This is also shows when government employs people from civil society and people who are passionate about the work that they're doing. Turuna, I'm going to hand over to you, but let me just give you your question. and you are going to be addressing the region, not necessarily addressing South Africa. So, what new frontiers are emerging around bodily autonomy, legal recognition in the region, and how should civil society prepare for this? And let me just add to your question. What opportunities exist for building a stronger alliance between local organization and international partners without losing community grounded leadership? Because sometimes when we are becoming a big beast, we tend to lose the small voices or organizations that are not well funded. So Terona, let me give over to you for you to take to go with those questions.
Thank you, Sibonelo. I think to start out with, I'd like to give a little bit of a background about my organization to many of our other partners, as well as members of the broader entity that are on this call. So Outright International is a global organization that is working to advance the human rights of LGBTIQ plus people everywhere. It was founded in 1990, and we work at the intersection of international, regional, and national advocacy. So we hold consultative status at the United Nations, where we advocate for the inclusion of LGBTIQ plus people in human rights and development frameworks. And we also partner directly with national and community-based organizations across regions. Our work combines rigorous research and documentation with advocacy, movement support, and emergency response in some instances. And we also serve as the secretariat of the UN LGBTI core group. And our work in South Africa over the years has been that South Africa has long been central to Outright's Africa programming, both because of the existing legal framework in South Africa, as well as having been intimately involved in the push towards equality. Being an LBQ founded and still an LBQ led organization after 36 years, we've learned a few lessons over the years, which is that the work of advancing LGBTIQ plus equality really needs to be led by movement leaders on the ground who originate from the communities that we want to advance rights for. And given this, in the broader African space at the moment, we have a number of different challenges and opportunities. So one of the new frontiers around bodily autonomy and legal recognition, and how civil society in South Africa can also prepare to work or respond to or work in partnership with these social issues are one, advancing the protection and recognition for intersex rights. So a particular concern for us is non-consensual medically unnecessary surgeries on intersex children. We have seen a rise in these procedures, but at the same time, we've also seen a rise in advocacy campaigns led by activists from countries such as Zimbabwe, Zambia, Ghana, Nigeria, that have been leading intersex-led initiatives in kind of sharing more information with their governments, particularly their departments of health, and showing that sex characteristics can belong in existing anti-discrimination frameworks, which most African countries do have some level of like protection for citizens from discrimination. The question is, does that extend to people on the basis of sexual orientation, gender identity and expression, or sex characteristics? So one of the opportunities we have with the intersex movement is that intersex rights have been articulated and recognized through Resolution 552, which is a soft law policy within the African Union space. As a resolution, it is kind of a guiding, influencing document that is a statement and an articulation of a shared understanding of how intersex rights can be protected within the African Union framework. Secondly, we're looking at conversion practices moving onto the legislative agenda. So stemming from, I think I would say, South Africa's strong leadership in kind of articulating and introducing programming around conversion practices as a key issue that challenges our community, we've seen that conversion practices sit on the same continuum as hate crimes and hate speech because they're rooted in the same homophobia and transphobia, and they often escalate over time, which typically begins with family pressure, prayer and counseling, and then progressing either to violence, economic duress, and ostracization. And the most egregious forms of conversion practices may amount to torture or cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment under international law, of which many African countries do have existing anti-torture frameworks, which can be tapped into to address the concern around conversion practices. In the SADC region particularly, there is programming that is being done with parliamentarians to sensitize them on the impact of conversion practices on real or imputed persons of SOGIESC identity. So what that means is that conversion practices, as much as they primarily impact the queer community, they also do have an impact on heterosexual individuals in the instances where sometimes they can be perceived to be queer, whether it's through effeminate expression, whether it's through accusations or suspicions that they may be engaging in intimate relationships or sex acts with people of the same gender or sex. They are also impacted and require like a level of protection, which is what has been articulated in Resolution 275, which is a similar resolution which particularly focuses on the protection of people of real or imputed SOGIESC status from violence or harm, particularly from state actors, which also exists within the African Union framework. And what we have seen is that there is work that is being done at an intersectional level, such as with the Psychological Society of South Africa, leading an initiative to reject conversion practices and develop the Johannesburg Declaration, which is signed by a number of African mental health professionals that have articulated the desire that even where there is active criminalization of LGBTIQ plus individuals in different African states, there are still the opportunities to provide affirming care, to provide services to queer community members in a way that affirms their dignity and protects and safeguards their mental health, which is particularly important as we are coming up to a moment where the United Nations is going to adopt a declaration on mental health and how the right to mental health is something that needs to be recognized at a global level. Continuing on that, we at Outright specifically program a lot on conversion practices because we think it's very important to ensure that, one, we are developing a shared understanding, and two, that we are taking advantage of existing legal mechanisms that are found in anti-discrimination frameworks, that are found in anti-torture frameworks, that are found in penal codes across the continent, that focus on the regulation of violence, focus on the regulation of sexual violence, focus on freedom of belief and cultural expression, and creates the safeguards that allow people to subscribe to the value system or belief system that they believe in, but also that there is a protection from divisive forces allowing for violence, discrimination, and harm to fall on citizens. And I think given the broader context on the continent at this point, we have particular concerns with how different anti-rights actors are deploying advocacy campaigns in the name of wanting to seek to advance family values. And organizations such as in South Africa, the Family Policy Institute, presents themselves often as a defender of faith, family, and freedom. And they are actually campaigning against things such as the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act that we now have, and claiming that these laws threaten religious freedom and the opposing of protections for people who are being killed or people who are exposed to violence such as hate crime is not a family value. And this is a particular concern given that the Interparliamentary Conference was recently held in Ghana, where a number of African states indicated a willingness to adopt a charter on family values that is exclusive of queer identity, that is very restrictive in how it understands human sexuality and family forming practices. And I think it's a particular concern for us in that anti-rights infrastructure is essentially also seeking to remove the separation of powers in democratic systems and prescribe set understandings of how individuals can exercise their rights and freedoms. So, for example, aside from the issue of same-sex marriage, which they are very predominantly against, they are also against issues such as sexual and reproductive health. So the bodily autonomy of people to make decisions around whether or not they will conceive children, whether or not they can seek to terminate a pregnancy, whether or not they can even use medication that is designed to reduce the likelihood of you contracting HIV and AIDS and other STIs. And I think this is a particular concern because it will have ripple effects on broader public health. It will have ripple effects on democratic infrastructure and what the meaning of your vote as a citizen will actually stand for. And I think lastly, there's a repressive link between the ability to freely express, campaign, identify, because freedom of expression and freedom of assembly are also two targeted issues that the anti-rights movement is trying to combat. So if we look at the example of the new sovereignty bill that was tabled in Uganda, as well as the PVO Act in Zimbabwe, the privatization of voluntary organizations, we can see alongside with the climate of cracking down on LGBTI rights or preventing LGBTI people from having access to various rights, there's also a stronger regulation of civil society so that they can restrict and kind of silence naysayers who are attempting to share alternative views or information about human rights issues that are impacting people across the African continent. And what this means for civil society is that for LGBTIQ plus organizations, we need to continue on mapping and researching anti-rights actors so that we can understand the existing ecosystem. But we also need to be looking at who funds, who convenes, and who messages this movement. And we need to be more visible in contesting the spaces that they target. So we need to ensure that we have effective representation in parliaments, in school curriculums, in UN processes, and in regional bodies. And we need to refuse the terms of their framing, that this is not a contest between faith and queer identity, but this is about affirming the role of faith leaders from the signatories of the Johannesburg Declaration, even to the late Imam Muhsin Hendricks, that their messages around how we can create an inclusive and affirming society that gives us all freedom and the ability to access our human rights. And I think alongside this, I'd also just like to share that we're seeing legal gender recognition now shifting from a medicalized to a rights-based model. So globally, there's a global trend of looking at self-determination, which is really important, particularly in the South African context, where we do require a level of medical-centered documentation in order for individuals to access the change of their sex marker on their legal documents. We think that civil society should prepare to document the harms of the current gatekeeping models and continue building the evidence base of how these barriers impact trans and gender diverse community members. And I think that we need to continue investing in legal literacy at community level so that we can build that documentation capacity so that violations are recorded systematically. And I think that's one thing I would like to appreciate about the work of the NTT and the various PTT structures, which is that this framework that we've developed in South Africa does not exist in another African context where we are monitoring, documenting, reporting violations, and tracking how the legal justice system is responding to that. And I think as we celebrate International Pride, it's important to note that while there are still many challenges where we are seeing, an escalation of hate crimes, where we are seeing victims of hate crimes being as young as 14 years old in 2025, we had a victim who was 14 years old of a brutal, violent hate crime. It's important to note that there is hope on the horizon in the sense of if we can organize, if we can document, if we can challenge and start to have coordinated work with different state departments and different stakeholders, then there is a way that we can turn the tide and start combating these challenges. So I'll pause there. Thank you, Sibonelo.
Thank you so much, Naidu, and thank you so much for also taking your time when you are not well. It shows the dedication that you have for this sector and for queer people. I am going to open for questions, but before I open for questions, I'm going to read a quote by Kwame. I hope I don't kill the surname, by Kwame Nkrumah. Kwame says, "I am not African because I was born in Africa, but I am African because Africa was born in me." And I think these words are important to me currently, especially with what March to March is doing, especially how it affects queer asylum seekers in the country, where they find themselves not being able to access healthcare, not being able to go to Home Affairs and renew their asylum seeking documents, not being able to move around and make a living, not being able to be themselves, even in a country that says it protects all that live in it. And I think as Africans, we really need to think and look down deep into our hearts of what we are doing to our or other siblings within Africa, because we are not doing the same to Europeans, we are not doing the same to Asians. All of this hate is directly focused to African, especially Black African people. And the people who bear the most brand in that will be our Black trans siblings, our Black lesbian siblings, and our Black queer siblings. I hope we find in our hearts to find another way of dealing with the challenges that we have in South Africa and stop blaming foreign nationals for the ills that government fails to address. With those words being said, to the colleagues, I'm going to have just one last question after question and answer. We have 20 minutes for questions, I think. So I will take the first 5 hands. I know there's questions in the chat. I will try and also address those, but can I take the first 5 hands? I think, Moyo, you would assist me in seeing the hands. I don't see no hands. It means the presentations were quite good. Colleagues, do you allow us to?
No, that's not what it means. It just means they don't have permissions. I'm trying to fix that.
Okay, I was going to say,
Macy
well,
has her hand up. I will just give her the platform.
Macy, you can ask your question.
Good day, colleagues, and my apologies for arriving so late. I think I had other commitments in the morning. My name is Macy Mutau. I'm the provincial chairperson for LGBTQI+ under Civil Society. My request is only one: can the presentations be shared via our email, if possible, so that we can familiarize ourselves with everything that is inside all the content? Thank you.
Moihabo, would it be possible to share the presentation by Mr. Mnyai? I think that's the one that is really important for people in the room to be able to know the work of the National Task Team, but also the work of the Rapid Response Team.
100%. I've generated the attendance list, and I'll be able to send to everybody on email.
Thank you so much for that, Moihabo. There was a question in the chat. I think Mr. Mnyai did respond to it, but maybe if the person did not hear about the response, the question was what CSOs fall under the RRT. I think Mr. Mnyai responded to that one. The entity elects or suggests organizations that will sit in the Rapid Response Team. This would be also determined by the organization's capacity, but also the focus of the organization that it does within the LGBTI sector. But maybe to also assist in understanding who are the entity members. The entity members are made up of government and civil society. Through civil society, we have provincial task teams which elect. Under provincial task team, all LGBTI organizations are supposed to be sitting in provincial task teams. Under those task teams, which is the provincial task teams, they elect 2 representatives, one the chair and one an alternative that is going to represent their work within the National Task Team. So they go and report their work within the National Task Team. The Provincial Task Team implement, the National Task Team oversees and also supports provincial task teams. The Rapid Response Teams, which is made up of government, Chapter 9 institutions, civil society, sit every month, looks at the cases that we have, see how we could assist cases. Each case has got a different different dynamics, so we can't put one case and say this is how all cases flow. I think Mr. Mnyai also explained that quite well by putting the three examples of the other cases. I think I've covered that part. Am I leaving anything out, Moihabo, when it comes to that question? With that, I'll take it. I didn't leave anything out. There was a second question which says, what is the role of DOJ in the RRT, Mr. Mnyai?
Thank you, Swanelo. The DOJ coordinates and convene the monthly rapid response team meeting, and then we incorporate inputs on progress made from SAPS into the list of pending cases in the criminal justice system. So in a nutshell, we monitor all hate crime cases, be it under investigation, be it at the court level. So to give an example with myself, Monday to Friday, I make sure I go to the template of pending cases and make sure all the updates are on par. To give an example, if the matter was at the court roll today, meaning that by tomorrow, I must be contacting the senior public prosecutor or the control prosecutor or court manager or clerk of criminal court to provide me with the progress of that specific case. And when I receive that information, then it must be updated on the template of pending cases. So we also receive the new hate crime cases from the CSOs. If we pick it up from the media, then we will ask our partners on the CSOs to assist with the name of the police station where the matter was reported and also the police station case numbers. So another question on the case was from Nell Darrell was how we should track the cases in time. Yes, when the case is reported to the rapid response center, we act immediately. So I was giving example in terms of when the rapid response team was established, there were the backlogs of cases by then because we didn't have the rapid response team. But then we managed to work on that backlog. But if you have a case that was not reported to the rapid response team, that you feel that it has been stuck in the criminal justice system, please check our details with Mhayabo and submit it back to us. And another question was on Musin Hendrik. The matter is with organized crime unit. The investigation is at advanced stage as reported by our Honorable Deputy Minister on our previous National Task Team. That's what we can report on. And then another question, Swanelo, was from our provincial office. What is the criteria used for civil society organization to be part of the rapid response team? We did mention previously, Swanelo, that queer-led organization should be sitting at the provincial task team. However, if there's any organization at the province that also work on SOGI SC issues, then it's a decision that should be taken by the provincial task team to say we can rope them in, they can be part of the provincial task team. So the provinces decide in terms of who need to sit, especially at the CSO's side. Government department, it's a replica of those government departments that we have at the national task team. Funding of PTTs that MC raised, we have requested the provincial task team work plans from all provinces. So those are the costed work plans that we have requested. So once we received that costed work plans, then we'll be able to disburse that budget to the provinces so that they can implement activities as captured on their work plan in terms of the national intervention strategy. Thank you, Swo.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mayor. I think I saw another hand being raised. I'm not sure, Moya, do you see it? I saw it pop up. I think it was by Kahleho or Khotso. I'm not sure. Going once, going twice, it means there was no hand.
But I don't see it.
Okay, I think maybe the person was then responded to. Now, going back to my panelists to close my panel, I have one last question. If there is one thing that you think, or one action, one concrete action that you think civil society, government, and allies should commit to in the next year to reduce hate crimes and hate speech within South Africa, what would it be? I will start with you, Mr. Mnyai.
Thank you, Swanelo. For me, it is a partnership that we must continue to have with our civil society organizations. Because some of the cases that are going through the fingers, we are not receiving them because organization previously used to take ownership of the cases. That is one of the things that make us working backward because there was an issue. How do you sit in Northwest and you are reporting the cases while you are sitting in Free State, whereas there's organizations in Northwest? So we have since also tried to address that, at least to avoid the issue of ownerships within amongst the CSOs. Hence, on the template, we used to include the name of the organization where the case is coming from. But we decided to do that away with the same reason, to make sure that all the cases are monitored regardless of where they are coming from. So coming to your question, Swanelo, I think collaborations that we have with our stakeholders, your NPA, your SAPS, and also some of the initiative that is taken by VISPOL through their standard operating procedure. This will also assist the issue of secondary victimization to be done with at the police station level, and also those activities that we are implementing through the National Intervention Strategy Provincial Task Team. Then we will be able to address or to be able to limit those cases of hate crimes that are reported.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mnyai. I totally agree with you. I think as also civil society, we should not have ownership of cases. Cases should be reported to the right organizations, also to the PTT, so that the PTT could report it to the RRT. If we don't do that, We will continue as organizations saying in the province, we have a lot of cases. However, when we look at national or when we look at the register, we only have a few cases that are sitting with us. Moyo, there's a question by Nell. I'm just not understanding it because I can't multitask with my laptop, and also as an old lesbian, I struggle to multitask. Could you please, for me, because it's a double question, I'm not sure where it's coming from. So I'm going to move over to Tuli. Tuli, your answer on my question.
So when we start with a statement of support that says you are welcome here, tangible protection says we have changed the space so you can survive and thrive here, and we will fight alongside you outside these walls. So what I mean by that is that firstly, as activists, we need to call out faith spaces that are perpetuating hate speech and conversion practices. We also, as faith leaders, we need to intervene in legislative spaces. So when there are new law, as well as to speak out in relation to inclusive grounding of faith. Faith leaders also need to stand between vulnerable and the vulnerable and the violent. So clergy need to physically stand as human shields in civil rights movement. We've seen that historically, but also we need them now to stand and be verbal in saying, this is how we see the world, and we want to build the bridge between those who are being vulnerable and those who are facing violence, and also offering support towards families, towards LGBTQI persons, towards those who are vulnerable, and offering spaces of acceptance. So this can either be through specialized counseling, through pastoral care, or even just linking those, if they do not have the knowledge, but linking them to civil society organizations that offer those services. And I think lastly, as activists, please do not be shy to go to church, and do not be shy to give your minister feedback. I know sometimes clergy complain that they do get a lot of feedback from people, but it's a part of an accountability mechanism when you go to your minister and you say, you know, when you spoke about this is the impression that you're providing. The way you've interpreted the scripture, you're creating a hostile environment, and this is against our constitution, and you're also creating division within this community. So I think you need to relook in how you interpret the scripture. So please don't be shy to go to church, don't be shy to give them feedback, and don't be shy to hold them accountable, because you are also part of the community. As much as you tithe either monthly or yearly, your rands, which is your queer rands, your gay rands, you know, they also shape the institution and uphold the systems that are there. So do not be shy, use your voice, hold them accountable, and also speak up, because faith leaders are also part of the community. They're also like you and I. Let's not be shy. Thank you.
Thank you so much. And Tuli, thank you for touching on the pink rand. We, as in South Africa, have over 200 billion buying power. And I hope with the interventions that government will do, especially in fixing unemployment, but also fixing the inequalities, especially when it comes to queer people, that 200 billion pink rand in the next year should be going towards $1 trillion, contributing towards the society or towards the country. Moihabo, I see your hand.
Just a comment from Nell Darrell. He says we need our ICMS. So ICMS is the Integrated Case Management System, to be integrated as such to see backlog matters of these hate crime matters. We need to identify these cases and track these cases in real time. Any matter over 6 months must be flagged as a risk case. This is from Nell Darrell from the Western Cape Justice Men's Forum and the ICMS stats clerk.
Thank you so much, Nell. Lulama. Is Lula still
Lulaman
in the
has
room?
left.
Oh.
They sent an email that they have another commitment.
Okay. Okay, Jade, since you are here.
I figured you'd say that. I think I really want to emphasize that combating or ending hate crimes against LGBTI persons, this is not a responsibility for just civil society alone, right? And I know that we're constantly having a back and forth with either DOJ, with either the LGBTI desk, with the PTTs. We've literally been having a back and forth for over 10 years with the PTTs that are, I want to say broken, which they are actually. Let me not try and even sugarcoat it. The PTTs are struggling, right, in provinces. And so the only structure that I can safely say remains is the entity as well as the RRT. But the RRT and the entity can't necessarily just hold the burden of the hate crimes cases that we all monitor as either civil society or with the help of DOJ, right? They can't only hold that because there are some cases in Limpopo, for example, when we went there last year to do the NIS training, people were saying, I think Munyai's office said that there's only like 5 cases in Limpopo, and that wasn't the case when we got to Limpopo. There were more than 10 cases of hate crimes, right? And so I really think that this work requires a collective commitment from both government and civil society. As much as government will make the moves of ensuring that these kind of structures exist, we must also make sure that we infiltrate these structures because they help us. I know I can call Munyai at 11 p.m. and say, Munyai, there's a case 1, 2, 3, and Munyai will constantly show up. But it can't just be a Munyai that does this work for us. It needs to be a collective responsibility from all of us. And I think that if we are serious about our constitutional democracy, then we really must equally be serious about protecting the lives of LGBTI people, because as we can all see, what is happening in the globe with the Trump administration, with our African leaders denouncing our existence as Black queer folk, we really do need to make sure that we try and combat hate crimes, because what will happen is that there will be more hate crimes cases that are experienced in communities and rural communities. So yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Jade, and thank you so much for the honest review of where we are. I will, Naidu, I see your hand, Moihab. Naidu, is she still in? I doubt. Maybe she's. Is Naidu still in, Moihab?
Hi, yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Okay, great. I think in short, one concrete action that would be very important is to see the Hate Crimes and Hate Speech Act becoming operational. So once those remaining outstanding aspects of the legislation are addressed by the DOJ and CD to ensure that it can become fully operational. I think it would be important for us to have an understanding of the costing of the implementation plan, and how state actors such as SAPS, prosecutors, and magistrates will be sensitized in making best use of the Act, so that sentencing can effectively address the high level of violence and hatred that is targeted towards our community through hate crimes that can now be addressed through this. Secondly, I think that it would be important for us to see stronger bridges between the community and civil society. So there are emerging platforms such as the National Dialogue, where there is, a LGBTIQ plus cohort or kind of platform for community members to learn more about the work of civil society. And there has been a number of robust discussions within this space questioning, what do civil society organizations do? And I think it's also our responsibility to find a way to kind of harmonize and make more accessible the work that we do to community members in far-lying spaces, people from rural backgrounds, people who are less engaged with the type of human rights advocacy work that we do. I think we have a responsibility in that regard. But at the same time, for community members to also take the opportunity to learn more from what is publicly available and accessible information, and to engage with our campaigns, to engage with discussions around not just hate crime, but pride, by what are your needs? We need to really understand queer communities in South Africa and across the African continent need. And I think lastly, the role of allyship. What we've learned from the discussion today is that because of key individuals working within the National Task Team, working within the Department of Justice and Constitutional Development, we've been able to have continuity for the recognition of the importance of protecting LGBTIQ+ rights. But we need to institutionalize this practice. So we cannot continue to rely on the fact that we have strong individuals who go over and above what is asked for them to maintain these platforms. We need to ensure that as institutions, we are clear in the inclusion of LGBTIQ+ equality in the mandate of the work that is being done, and that all levels of officials, from senior management level all the way down to clerks and admin officials, have an understanding that, there is a need to provide services in such a way that LGBTIQ+ people experience the highest level of human dignity and equality. And I think as African citizens, it's also really important to take our role as allies to protect people from different forms of harm. And the issue of migration as a key concern at this point in time is one that I think we need to address within the community. We know that South Africa is the only African country that has a explicit protection for LGBTIQ+ refugees seeking asylum on the basis of their sexual orientation or gender identity and expression, exposing them to harm in whatever state they may be originating from. And our responsibility is to ensure that our community spaces are welcome and supportive of African migrants that are seeking that protection, because we know from the days of the Forest Town raids in South Africa that these protections have been hard fought for and need to be preserved. And I would like to live in a society where we can extend that grace to our queer brothers and sisters from across the continent.
Thank you so much, Naidu. Thank you so much for your contribution. I think in closing this session, I have to comment as well. But I will first want to recognize where we are. There is nowhere in Africa that has this platform that we have today. I think it is a privilege. I think I am honored. I think I am proud to be South African for just that we have a government that can be able to hold this space. Having said that, LGBTI persons still experience violent crimes. Every time I have to go to an RRT meeting, which is next week for me, I get anxiety when I have to go through the cases, because I know when I come back home, I'll come back home depressed because of the level of violence that queer people continue to face. Employment. is still very low for queer people, especially trans and non-conforming bodies and intersex people. And part of our pillars in the NIS is to address the economic burden that queer people continue to face. So my commitment and for this or my tenure is that we look at ways on how to address that particular part. But currently we are facing xenophobia. I've seen xenophobia in so many spaces, in so many groups that I thought were safe spaces for our queer siblings. However, the amount of hate, even within the sector, is shocking. I think it shows that as civil society, somewhere, somehow, we have dropped the ball in making sure we bring our community on the same page, on the harsh realities of our siblings that they face in our countries. No one leaves their home because they want to leave their home and go to another home. It is because of the circumstances that they face. And it can't be that in South Africa, we again, as queer people, are the ones who are xenophobic or show no heart or no love to our siblings that are coming here because they're trying to survive and live just because they are chased away from where they come from because of who they are. I will continue to allow myself to be held accountable by the sector, by the people that I serve as the chairperson. And I think people who in this room know me will know that I'm open to criticism in any time and also to be held accountable. But also what I commit to is making sure that I leave nobody behind. I leave no intersex person behind, no trans person behind, no lesbian behind, no queer person behind, no white person behind, no black person behind, and no Indian person behind, as because we are all South Africans. And for us to celebrate the 60th anniversary of our constitution, it depends on us to show up on the table. I think what Sally Cross once said to me, which really frustrated me at some point when I was still young, working in Durban, she said, and when she was still alive, she said, it gets better. And for me, I never understood how can it get better. So I waited for the workshop to get finished, and then I went to sit next to Sally Cross and asked her, what do you mean it gets better? But she explained to me, it only gets better when we are all involved. It only gets better when we are all participating in structures such as your local structures, your LACs, your provincial task teams, your provincial structures, your government meetings, your workshops. It will only get better if you are present there and your voice is heard. And from that day, I will take those words from Sally Cross meaningfully, because I have seen it get better, and it can only get better if we are all playing our part. With those words, I would like to say thank you to my participants. Thank you to Deputy Minister Nell, my co-chair, for hosting this very important convening. And thank you to the organizers, Moya and Mr. Mnyai. And I'm handing over to you, Moya. Thank you so much, colleagues, for being here. And also, sorry, Nolhlanhla put a very important comment on the chats. Minister Nell, I know you are my co-chair, but from civil society, next financial year, we need a bigger budget to make sure that provincial task teams and family of victims and survivors are able to then receive support, because the current budget that we receive as a national task team is not sufficient. And I think it shows by how PTTs are struggling in being able to perform to their fullest. With those words, thank you so much.
Thank you, Sibonelo. Thank you so much for heeding the call to lead this specific panel. Thank you to all the speakers for engaging as beautifully as you did. I mean, I had no doubt, because I've engaged with all of you, I've engaged with your work, and I knew there's nobody else who's better to speak to these particular issues. I now hand back to Advocate Lotz, Chief Director in the Department of Justice, to just provide closing remarks for us.
Thank you very much, Program Director, Ms. Toka. Honorable Deputy Minister Nell, Mr. Nell, esteemed panelists, colleagues, and friends. As we close this Pride Month webinar, I am filled with both deep gratitude and a renewed sense of urgency. Today, as we traversed under the theme Reflect, Renew, and Recommit, we do indeed mark 30 years of constitutional democracy. We celebrated our judicial victories while confronting the harsh realities that the LGBTI community still faces on a daily basis. Our conversations were marked by radical honesty, proving that whilst our challenges are heavy, our collective resolve is even heavier. Sincere thanks to Honorable Deputy Minister Nell. Thank you for your leadership and keeping us firmly focused on state accountability, and for all that you do in the work of the department. Our panelists and speakers, thank you for your courage, insights, and dedication to your work. And of course, to our moderator, Mr. Sibonelo Trawa. Thank you for steering the discussion. I think you made sure that all of the key issues are elevated. And of course, you also challenged the panel on a variety of critical issues. Thank you for all the participants. Thank you to the social partners and the officials in the department and all our key stakeholders that are present here. Thank you very much. Perhaps I must also just mention the program director. Thank you for program directing, Ms. Toka. You ensured that the webinar is well organized and that the program that we had to go through today was also reflecting the renewed hope that we have in terms of ensuring that the issues that were discussed here today are going to be taken forward always. So thank you very much for your time, your partnership, colleagues, and for your unwavering commitment always. Wishing you a safe, reflective, and meaningful Pride Month. Thank you. Thank you. Ngiyabonga.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Advocate Lords. Thank you, DM. Thank you very much, Sibonelo. Thank you, Ntate Nkumbuleni Munyai. Thank you, Ms. Lulama Shongwe. Thank you, Jade. Thank you to Runa. Again, thank you all for taking time out of your busy schedules to participate today. I have put in my contact details as Moya Habotoka, as well as Ntate Munyai's contact details in the chat for your engagement going further. We always remain available to support any projects that you may have. We always remain available to get you in contact with whoever you may need. As was said, Ntate Munyai is on the phone 24/7 dealing with these issues. Even now, I'm sure between answering questions right now, he was taking calls. We could hear him. And again, that's the level of commitment we have shown to this particular work and advocating for the rights of the LGBTQ community. And again, working together, as was emphasized throughout the session, remains the cornerstone of our work. In so doing, please, we remain available to support all projects. You call, we come running, we participate. We're here to do that. That's why we're here. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, colleagues, and have a good rest of your Friday. Enjoy the rest of your Pride Month. Enjoy the rest of your Youth Month.